in units. There were as much as 60 people sharing a washroom. And there's an example of a fellow who gave his life jacket to save a man, the daughter Cheryl Blaze said. And he would not, and this was in the Pacific, and actually saved people from drowning, but then died in his final months and weeks at the Soldiers' Home in Holyoke, Massachusetts, which is about 90 miles west of Boston. Turns out that this facility, Cliff and Doctor, was ravaged with COVID, and they had no idea what to do with people or how to treat them, even though there were protocols in place, even though our own government had protocols in place. In one line of that report, a social worker called out a decision superiors gave to consolidate infected and healthy veterans together in a single ward. And this worker noted that transferring the former soldiers downstairs was like moving the concentration camp. We were just moving those unknowing veterans off to die. So I ask you once again, and we've gone through these stories time and time again, what's going on? We had the Legionnaires in Quincy with the water supply. People died, 16 of this, but you would figure that things would change, and in fact, in these circumstances, they haven't. Okay, and goodness knows how many other ravaged veterans' homes there are, but we know certainly this one, it was awful. Then we look towards the West Virginia VA hospital under investigation, and what happened there was they were probing 10 patients died who were actually given insulin. Now you'd think, okay, well that's a good thing. You need insulin, you get it. The unfortunate part for these people is they didn't need insulin. They were put in insulin shock when they were given injections to their belly, and they passed away, and there's a major investigation going on in West Virginia.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, I don't understand the continuing lack of care for our heroes, and this is our group is the American heroes. Well, I would think that what we're hearing is really the antithesis of it. So,
absolutely, Steve, are you going to be able to handle some of this?
Well, I would hope I could. The West Virginia is in West Virginia, but I'm certainly our firm does all of these things. We do veterans.
I know you do. Sure.
Malpractice. We do them here in Chicago. We do them all around the nation.
Right.
And the COVID people. Really, I mean, COVID is a tricky disease. We know it, but to just without regard throw people into a unit knowing that that's absolutely wrong, watching people, die and in comas next to somebody who's perfectly healthy with no protective equipment. And actually, it has gone so far where there was a law firm that was charged with investigating this on behalf of the government, and they said it was a complete and utter failure at these homes. And I will tell you that this is just a horrible example of what we see pretty much on a daily basis.
And it looks like things are getting worse.
They are, and that's the surprising part.
Right.
That is the surprising part. And I will say that since we last talked, there was a good decision where if you were a veteran and had to go into the emergency room, for instance, the VA, unless you went into a VA emergency room, VA did not have to pay for emergency room treatment. So you go in, okay, you think you have an emergency, let's say you go into a hospital, I want to get treated, but you can't make it to the VA. Well, you'd get charged by that unless you had an insurance policy that would pay it. You would actually get charged for that service. There was a class action suit brought, and fortunately, there was a decision that really could cost billions of dollars to veterans, where the U.S. Court of Appeals for Veterans Claims had said the VA had been wrongfully denying reimbursement to veterans who sought emergency medical care at non-VA facilities, and struck down an internal VA regulation that blocked those payments. So there actually was an internal regulation that said as a veteran, you had no right to go into an emergency room, even though you might have been having, God forbid, something terribly life-threatening. you couldn't get those procedures paid by the VA. Well, that's now different. As of today, in the ruling, it said all of this is unacceptable, and it ordered the VA secretary to re-adjudicate the reimbursement claims. And that's the type of progress I think we've seen happening, Cliff and Doctor, over the course of the time we've been talking. If you recall, we had the Ferris Act. That was the act that prevented veterans or current service employees from suing for malpractice. That changed with legislation. We now see this decision changing with legislation. But really, things remain the same as far as care and treatment in a lot of these VA facilities. And I think really there has to be a groundswell of support to change that.
Yeah, and that's really very interesting, because I know Cliff has had a really long and distinguished service career, as a Vietnam veteran. And the way that some of the Vietnam veterans were treated when they first got back was really kind of appalling. And so we don't want to see this going into the future. And I know you feel that way too, Cliff, that we need to do something for these veterans.
Yeah, that's right. Steve, have you done anything yet relative to possibly representing these people?
Well, as far as VA claims, yes, we've been representing people who have been mistreated by veteran hospitals for years. So the answer is yes to that question. We would hope, like in all of these types of situations, that we see care that improves, but there are very specific time limits in veterans cases. You have 2 years in which you have to file a special claim form. Once you file the claim form, usually the Department of Justice will probably reject the liability. You have to file a lawsuit within 180 days thereafter. So there's a lot of tricks here that are set up, a lot of problems, and that you have to kind of follow through. We do those things. We've seen a lot of terrible, egregious things. We're now seeing some people are active service suing for malpractice, where previously they could not. Before a year ago, they now can. But it is a continuing problem, and I think that the veterans care has always sort of somehow slipped to the downside of the list, in numerical list. It doesn't seem to be the most important thing that is really troubling the government, and that's a concern. I mean, I think the doctors there, I know doctors who work at the VA, I know doctors who are contracted, they do an excellent job. But
I know right.
Unless there's focus on it, you're not going to have you're not going to bring that big spotlight to the problems.
Yeah, and as you were saying, even with as practicing medicine, you have to follow a certain type of protocol, and make sure that the person's well informed and that they agree to doing things. And it sounds like there's some administrative decisions being made high up above that really are influencing how things are being done too.
Well, and you being in the medical field, Doctor, there's a standard of care which all doctors must live up to, as all lawyers and any professional. And if you fall below that standard of care, that's called malpractice. And we see very, very excellent care, but there are times when people, doctors, lawyers, they all fall below the standard of care. I mean, they can, and that's what creates these types of lawsuits. But with VA, it's a question of importance. And, these are people that we know, veterans who have given their life, and, the years of service expect to be taken care of. And these are the people we should be taking care of, and they're not. And I'll give you another example, Doctor. When Cliff and I have talked about over the course of the last year, we have cases for these earplug cases, 3M earplug cases.
Yes.
And you might or might not be familiar with that, Doctor, where those were 3M. Aero was the original manufacturer of those. They basically sold the bill of goods, allegedly, to the government, saying, hey, these are good earplugs. All the servicemen got them. 3M actually bought Aero. They sold a ton of these earplugs. Well, guess what? They were ineffective. They didn't work.
Yes.
So, that's we see that too. We see these types of claims. And Roundup, I mean, there's another example, not necessarily with veterans, but with people in general.
Sure.
That there's now a $10 billion this week, $10 billion settlement fund set up for those people who have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and other problems with because of exposure to Roundup. We have quite a few cases of those pending. So we see these things happen, but it shouldn't happen to VA. It should not happen in the VA. We should be really, really watching out for our veterans.
Yes.
That's the point of, I think, this whole thing. That's the takeaway.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And, I know what you're talking about, the triple flanged earplugs, the green and yellow. I have some at home, so I know. But but I know we're getting close to, the time.
Let me ask this real
sure.
question, Doc.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, I just want, the earplugs, we talked about that as we do normally about things on the show that we talk about. Is there any anything relative to that now, Constantly?
Well, yeah, there's litigation. We have quite a few of those cases.
You do?
We're
Okay.
shutting on the time limits because
Sure.
it's been out there a little while. So if people have a hearing loss, most of the times we find out about them through people who've gone to the disability functions of the Veterans Administration, and they can't get disability or can get disability for hearing loss, and then they wonder how they got this hearing loss. And we had on the show, if you remember, Steve Handmaker, who was the second person in Iraq, if you recall, and lost his hearing. Yes, these cases are pending, and you've got a finite amount of time in which to do anything about them. So, got to act. Don't sit on your rights.
That's it. Well, you do a great job. That's for sure, Steve. Doc, you're running the show.
Okay, yes, getting close to our time. But one other thing I want to mention was the loss of hearing, but also tinnitus. The ringing in the ears that people sometimes complain of too. But we're getting close to the end of the show, so I want to thank you for all of the things you have done and the support you've been giving to America's Heroes Group. And so I'm going to let you come in and then, tell me something that you think you need us to hear and the veterans out here need to hear from the legal perspective that's going to cause us to, take responsibility, take some action, and get some things done.
Well, I think the power of the collective power of everybody getting together is really a tremendous collective power. And I will say that we saw this with that act that changes the Fairest Act. I think everybody's got to get together, and they've got to collectively make their voices heard with regard to the legislators, people they elect, the senators, the congressmen, the Duckworth, Durbin, congressmen, congresswomen. Have to be heard that the veterans are important. I'm happy to speak with any veteran about any issue.
I know you
collectively, and I'm happy to sit down and to have a forum of any sort whatsoever to run through any problems that might exist.
Okay, Supreme Attorney Seidman, I'd like to thank you for being on the show. And then also, I'm going to have the audience stay tuned, and I and Cliff will be back in a moment after a break.
Thank you all.
Thank you.